The first wave of holidaymakers spent Boxing Day at the beach. While many people were slow to make travel plans, they chose the North Coast as their holiday destination this summer. During January, the normal population of Foster Tuncurry alone is expected to jump from 15,000 to 60,000.
People are heading towards the cheaper end of the market as far as accommodation and activities are concerned, so I think that's a result of the economy generally.
Camping grounds and caravan parks have been heavily booked, with vacancies still remaining at mid-range and more expensive accommodation. Tourism manager Kerry Smith says the region's beaches and lakes are the big drawcards.
A lot of people don't realise just what they've got in their own backyard in this northern Hunter Valley area, and the Great Lakes area certainly has a lot to offer.
Kerry Smith says the Great Lakes area can cope with the influx of people, as it has the second largest amount of accommodation in the state. The first wave of holidaymakers spent Boxing Day at the beach. Many people have chosen the North Coast as the place to spend their summer break, but anyone inquiring about accommodation at Byron Bay will be in for a rude shock. Most accommodation is booked out through January. The Tourist Information Office is advising people to look elsewhere on the far North Coast. At holiday spots further south, like the Great Lakes area, people have been slow to make bookings this year.
They were slow starting, but everybody's here now, and the weather's great and the town's really buzzing.
Camping grounds and caravan parks have been heavily booked, with vacancies still remaining in more expensive accommodation.
People are heading towards the cheaper end of the market as far as accommodation and activities are concerned, so I think that's a result of the economy generally.
Normally you'd only see crowds like this at the races when it's free. Everyone paid at the gate today. Just before the first race, the line to the turnstile stretched 100 metres.
It'll be interesting to see today how the crowd goes in comparison with this year's Cup in September. It could give it a real nudge.
It's been a long time since the betting ring looked this full, and even longer since the bookies have looked this flush. Many people appeared to have saved a few dollars from the Christmas splurge and were keen to turn it into something bigger. Others had leftovers of a different kind and were finishing them off in style. And there was plenty of Christmas cheer still in the air. Hundreds of people brought their own picnic atmosphere to the track. The wind adding a little extra fun for families between races. But the difficulties were all forgotten as the horses came into the straight for each event and the crowd surged forward to cheer on their favourite. And while the punters collected, the real workers were given their own special reward. Those lucky enough to have had a win early in the day were keen to reinvest in the first leg of the extra double, the John Ragg Handicap. $4, $9 and $8. Thwarted paid $5.90 and $1.90. The Quinella $36.80 and the Trifecta $216.20.
At Lemon Tree Passage yesterday, fire raced through tinder-dry bush to within metres of homes. Residents were ready to evacuate as 6 bushfire brigade units fought the blaze. Today, brigade members were still mopping up. The bare earth and smouldering remains an indication of the ferocity of the fire, which may have been deliberately lit. There is evidence that other fires at nearby Anna Bay were the work of a firebug.
Well, there's some evidence been left behind certainly in the Fisherman's Bay, Morna Point area, Boat Harbour area, where we've found that there's been receptacles remain behind after it.
In the present conditions, just a carelessly discarded cigarette can be fanned into an inferno.
Well, what we say to people, remember the vegetation on the ground, there's no moisture in it at all, and the slightest spark, even from a cigarette, with the right wind will cause that fire.
Only significant rain will ease the present high bushfire risk for the remainder of summer. Jim Sullivan, NBN News.
It was one of the most physical races seen at the Motordrome in years, and the drivers make no secret of the fact that they went out there to slam each other after a few scrapes earlier in the night.
The guy that I had trouble with all night, I thought he was my brother. He was so close to me, like he was running over the front of the car and spun me out.
But the paybacks proved expensive. Replacement parts alone have cost the American team $10,000. That's without paying the mechanics to work until 4 each morning rebuilding the cars. Team manager John Torres today warned they will pull out of the rest of the series if the second test again becomes a demolition derby, and said the Australians were unprofessional and unsportsmanlike, a claim scoffed at by Aussie driver Bob Brewer.
It's a shame they didn't bring some sportsmanship with them, you know, but that's the old story. If you can't stand the heat in the kitchen, well, jump out.
But when we spoke to Soares in March this year, he was all for bump and grind racing.
You got to hold your line and you got to stay where you're pushing back.
After working 18-hour days to get his car back on the track, Brewer believes if they can't take what they dish out, maybe they should think about going home.
I'd suggest they get their dolls and prams and just push them off into the sunset.
It's hoped both teams will have their repair work finished before race time tomorrow night.
Yachting fiasco makes seasoned sailors wonder if it's worthwhile.
Call out to all advise them of the situation and ask them to burst their boats and do so.
And the G.
Business and community service groups gathered at the Kent Hotel to remember the of 10:27am, December 28, 1989. A simple but moving ceremony saw several floral tributes laid and a minute's silence observed to one of the 3 people tragically killed in Beaumont Street when the Newcastle earthquake struck. While the events aren't widely talked about, Chamber of Commerce spokesman Lindsay Parker says emotions are still running deep.
There's a lot of emotion involved in the earthquake there 4 years ago. I mean, the loss of life was obviously the immediate effect. The street was physically closed for over 5 weeks. I know a number of traders went broke in that period of time. That's why when we look at the street today, there is a certain amount of pride felt.
The Hamilton of today has seen significant improvements. Having endured their ordeal in the aftermath of the earthquake, prosperity has started to return.
It's come a little bit easier lately as more and more buildings have gone up to take the places of the damaged one. All the hoardings, I remember that as being a very significant day when we saw the last of the hoardings in Beaumont Street go down. To me, that was a milestone in the street, and on in, I'm sure we'll only improve.
The only other event today saw the Citizens Earthquake Action Group meet to review what had been learnt in the aftermath of the historic shake. The Carrington residential precinct, which takes in a large Grave Street, has been earmarked for 150 medium-density homes. Mirvac Projects will pay $855,000 for the 3.89 hectare site, having made a written commitment to establish high-quality affordable housing. The first residential land released by the Honeysuckle Development Corporation drew solid interest from the private sector.
Over 15 tender packages went out and 4 final submissions came in. The important thing about the process is that the 4 that came in were very quality tenders, and as a result of that we've been able to successfully lock together a deal with Mirvac, and hopefully over the next 12 months you'll see some housing actually coming out of the ground.
Mirvac anticipates it will inject $10 million into the project, with the site to also receive $1.2 million worth of work on foreshore landscaping from Better Cities funding. Newcastle Chamber of Commerce President Colin Chapman says the Mirvac proposal is the kind of injection the honeysuckle development needs.
They're very experienced people, they're very good at what they do, And it's very important in a situation like Honeysuckle that we're successful from the start, and I do believe that they assure us of success immediately.
The Honeysuckle Corporation will help Mirvac meet the 150-day development approval deadline for the 145-home project. Its expected work will begin on site in the second half of next year.
Last night it became obvious the expansion plate in the northbound lane on the southern side of the bridge was coming loose, but efforts to contact the RTA proved fruitless. Eventually, just after 7 o'clock this morning, the girder-like plate finally flipped up into the roadway. With no warning signs in place, 2 semis, a Pantech truck and a car towing a boat trailer hit the metal plate, blowing tyres. The driver of this Ampol tanker told how he had to fight to keep his fully laden vehicle from veering into the bridge. He and another semi-driver went back and pushed the heavy expansion plate to the side of the road. While cars were passing over the gaping hole with just a bump, motorcyclists were warned of the potential danger by police while they waited some 2 hours for the RTA crew to arrive. The Bulahdelah RTA depot had advised its responsibility ended at the northern end of the bridge, and it was up to Newcastle depot to fix the problem. While drivers were angry at the destruction of tyres like these, worth almost $1,000 each, they were even angrier at the thought of what could have been the outcome. Jim Sullivan, NBN News.
Port Stephens Bushfire Control is having its busiest time of year. December has seen the control centre respond to 60 calls to fires. National Parks and Bushfire Brigades are concerned by the high number of blazes that have broken out in the peninsular area between Nelson Bay and Boat Harbour.
The fires of the last 3 or 4 weeks here in this shire along the coast have indicated that things are extremely dry, and we shouldn't underestimate the potential of fire at this present time.
We're concerned, as are the volunteer brigades, that someone eventually will get or lose their house, or someone will lose their life.
Monday's fire at Lemon Tree Passage highlighted their worst fears, flames coming close to houses, but no one claims to know who started the outbreak. National Parks has appealed for community attitudes to change immediately because they believe an arsonist is responsible.
We are more concerned with the activities of some adults that we believe are lighting fires, who are very mobile, going from one place to another, and we appeal to all Tomaree Peninsula residents to pass on any information to us that may assist in the arrest of persons involved in lighting fires out there.
Anyone who can help investigations is asked to contact Port Stephens Fire Control or the National Parks and Wildlife Service.
The 12-metre yacht with its crew of 3 from the Hawkesbury was waiting for the Swansea Bridge to open just before 9 this morning when the trouble began.
There were a few boats lined away and we got caught in the tide. We've got a 90 horsepower Perkins engine, full bore and reverse, and we just went sideways in here.
As the tide rushed in, the yacht became wedged under the bridge, but while the Pride was damaged, the $150,000 plus vessel was relatively unscathed.
We left Pittwater at about 3 a.m. this morning and had a beautiful sail up. We got our life jackets and relaxed and couldn't believe it when this happened.
After 3 hours, it was mid-tide and the Coast Guard vessel Henderson pulled the yacht to safety. Locals say for those not used to the area, the tide can create problems.
The Breakers face two challenges at the Croatian Sports Centre, a wet pitch and a Melbourne Knights team keen to show why they lead the National League. Zoran Trashevski took 15 minutes to open the goal-scoring floodgate. Just before half-time, Andrew Marth chalked up the home side's second goal to give them the advantage before a crowd of less than 2,000 ardent fans. 10 minutes after the break, the Knights juggernaut made it 3-0, with the ball guided home by Mark Viduka. Newcastle keeper Clint Gosling must have felt under siege, as Damien Vojtek completed his side's Wednesday evening crusade. Returning respectability to the scoreline for the Breakers fell to Howard Tredinnick. The defeat leaves Newcastle in equal 8th with a 4-win, 6-loss record. Next Monday evening they take on 6th place Brisbane with a win paramount to their hopes of making the playoffs.
Sandon Stolly played like he normally does on the circuit, forgetting about his opponent's reputation and slamming away. Lendl made sure the young Aussie didn't become too much of an upstart, replying with some perfectly weighted shots and that devastating serve. Lendl is playing a series of games at Salamander to prepare himself for the Australian summer circuit and to acclimatise to the heat, and he was certainly accommodated today. At 10 o'clock the temperature on court was 31 degrees, ensuring every movement was a strain and a sweat maker. Lendl tried to keep himself cool using a chilled towel from an esky, but it gave only momentary relief. Stolly, on the other hand, revelled in the heat and pushed Lendl to a first set tie-break. Lendl's serve again coming to the rescue, winning the first set 7-6 and the second 7-5. Tomorrow Lendl will play India's Linada Pays in another exhibition game. Spectator entry to Roche Racket Resort is free.
The fight started outside the tourist hotel at Sandy Hollow at about 7 last night.
He went out on the footpath and became involved in an argument with another man, and as a result of that argument the other man punched him to the ground and then apparently kicked him around the head and upper body. The victim was unconscious.
The 33-year-old victim, Stephen Locke from Charm Haven, was rushed to Denman Hospital with head injuries. But his condition was thought to be so serious a medical team was flown in by the Westpac Rescue Chopper to transfer the patient to Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital. Locke and his alleged attacker were camping near Sandy Hollow. It's believed both men were drinking through the afternoon. Locals were surprised by the attack in the quiet town.
It's not an area or a hotel known for violence or anything like that. It's very uncommon, really.
Tonight, the victim's condition is described as satisfactory. He should go into surgery tomorrow.
Ploughing is one of the oldest tasks Australian farmers have performed on the land. As a sport, competitors are judged on how neat and straight their furrows are. More than 40 ploughers from all parts of the state battled the heat at Oxley Island today, competing in a range of categories. Rodney Sampson from Raymond Terrace took out the Novus training event with the help of his horses Duke and Danny. He was followed by a string of North Coast entrants, including Bob Mason from Bobbin and Ralph Voger from Kempsey. Cranback's Sandra Hargraves won the ladies' driving event.
Often a victim of wet weather, last night Speedway competitors found themselves racing on a Motordrome donut which had been dried out by summer winds. King of Wings Classic was the centre of attention, and early in the final it appeared an upset could be on the cards. Bruce White had taken early control and was keeping the pedal planted on the metal. Visiting American Leland McSpadden had to be content racing with the pack, but didn't pose a serious threat to the leaders. Out in front, Bruce White had John Walsh of Sydney nipping at his heels. Walsh appeared to have handling problems in the early heats, but had no problems when it came to giving White the slip 2 laps from the finish. The victory will go down as a memorable one for the Sydney driver, who made his first season venture to the Motordrome for last night's meeting. In the modified rods, Mick Turner proved too slick for his opponents, taking the lead early and holding on for a win. The Motordrome revs up again on Wednesday night for the England-Australia solo test. Back at the Lake Macquarie Yacht Club, Tom Braidwood is preparing for his next venture, sailing around Australia on Hunter Endeavour. Despite having an arduous and unsuccessful run in the Sydney to Hobart, Tom says his confidence hasn't suffered.
Oh no, just built them more than anything because I know what it's like being out in 75 knots or around about that sort of wind strength, so you sort of know what to expect.
The 21-year-old crewed on the Atara, which succumbed to the meted out to the Sydney-Hobart fleet by the weather. He also found himself helping to rescue John Quinn after the Sydney businessman became separated from his vessel and spent 5 hours stranded in the middle of Bass Strait. Quinn's first words were close to what you'd expect from a man who'd survived the ordeal.
Can I have a drink of water? It was pretty dry after, swallowing a lot of salt water. Like when you go to the beach, you swallow a fair bit, but he'd been out there for 5 hours, so he'd pretty much recycled it all, I think.
Tom's next adventure has him combining with respected Lake Macquarie sailor Tony Mowbray for a 6,500 nautical mile circumnavigation of the Australian mainland. The record attempt and fundraiser begins in March, with Tom and Tony both hoping Mother Nature is kind to the Hunter Endeavour.
The bike ride was first organised by Senior Sergeant Rod Saunter 2 years ago. He died of a heart attack while riding the leg to Cessnock. His colleagues from the entrance decided to keep the 175-kilometre event going in his honour.
We've taken over here to continue raising funds for the house, Ronald McDonald House, but secondly, and I guess maybe most importantly, is for Rod, because we felt we hadn't finished the ride and that we had to continue his efforts.
More than $14,000 was raised last October. It was today presented to Del Gilmore of Ronald McDonald House by Chief Inspector Ray Greentree. It will be used to keep the house going at John Hunter Hospital and for future expansion.
We're also hoping that we might be able to extend our house because of the high degree of demand we have for accommodation at Ronald McDonald House.
According to Constable Little, the Rod Saunter Memorial Charity Bike Ride will only get bigger and better.
We do hope it to be an annual ride, and I'm sure the house wants us to be an annual ride as well, because we've raised $14,200 for them this year, and last year it was $6,000, and we'd like to continue and increase it every year if we can.
That we might be able to extend our house because of the high degree of demand we have for accommodation at Ronald McDonald House.
Ms Peters said the support from various organisations was overwhelming.
We've really had a tremendous amount of support, and the people who've supported this ride have just been amazing. They've been people from all different walks of life, from businesses, private individuals, and of course the police themselves, who did such a superb job in organising it and then taking part as well.
According to Constable First Class Little, the Rod Saunter Memorial Charity Bike Ride will only get bigger and better.
We do hope it to be an annual ride, and I'm sure the house wants us to be an annual ride as well, because we've raised $14,200 for them this year, and last year it was $6,000, and we'd like to continue and increase it every year if we can.
Firefighting Enterprises of Georgetown is a James Hardy business supplying gear to New South Wales brigades and rescue squads, as well as to local industries and businesses. Now the company is branching into the domestic market. It's just signed a deal for a German product called Biofax. According to Tom Thompson of Firefighting Enterprises, it's an environmentally friendly fire retardant which can be used on clothing, curtains, mattresses, carpets and lounges.
If burning embers go into the house, they don't start the fabrics inside the house on fire and start an internal house fire.
To show you how it works, we set up this control demonstration at the mine's rescue station. The retardant is sprayed onto a strip of woolen carpet, and using an accelerant, the carpet is set alight. The part of the carpet with the retardant doesn't burn. There are also other devices for the home, including extinguishers, smoke detectors, interior and exterior sprinklers and fire blankets.
It's a problem that the fire industry has had, that we've always sold fire equipment to put out the fire, but this is our new generation of products that actually protect the household before the fire takes hold.
For houses bordering bushland, fire officers say it's imperative that yards are cleared and roofs and gutters cleaned. Where possible, breaks should be built.
Along their back fences, particularly where they back onto bushland areas, they can clear a space to prevent the fire from running right up to the fence lines.
There is so much you can do to protect your house, and when you weigh up the costs, it's relatively cheap. It will cost virtually nothing to clean up the yard, and for around $1,000 you can biofax the inside of an average house, get smoke detectors, an extinguisher and a fire blanket. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
While fires have ravaged bushland around Newcastle for almost 2 weeks, property losses have been minimal. Chairman of Trustees of the Earthquake Fund, Newcastle Lord Mayor John McNaughton, says he's yet to identify anyone who would not be looked after by insurance or existing benefits. But he still doesn't rule out movement of some of the Earthquake Fund into a broader appeal for bushfire victims if a need can be identified.
I think that the bushfire appeal will end up with some of it, but as necessary, if there's a need, the trustees, I hope, will be freed up to make a decision where at the present time they are specifically precluded from making a decision. And if there's a need, I would hope that that would be met.
There does seem to be public support for helping disaster victims outside the Newcastle area.
I think if they've got the money there, it should be used to the best available sort of use.
Yes, I think that, it should go to the bushfire appeal.
I think it should be donated to people in need, and I think it should go to the people in need from the bushfires throughout New South Wales.
It's still unclear if the fund could now assist a cause like the Westpac rescue helicopter. John McNaughton says because the original funds were gathered for disaster relief, the helicopter would have to be linked with the disaster. But he agreed it played a vital role in averting disaster during the bushfire emergency. The full decision of the court is yet to be considered by the fund trustees. Jim Sullivan, NBN News.
The Salvation Army has worked hard through the last 2 weeks supporting firefighters in the battle against the bushfires. They served around 60,000 meals. But the Salvos haven't given up yet. A national appeal has been launched to raise money for disaster relief, but a word of warning.
It's been the experience of the past that there are unscrupulous people that come out of the woodwork at any time, and there would be those out there, no doubt, who would try to cash in.
The Salvos are only taking money through their offices or the mail. Anyone who claims to be collecting for the Salvos bushfire appeal door to door should be reported to the police. Meanwhile, the Salvation Army has been overwhelmed with support from the community through the tragedy of the bushfires, helping with food and drinks.
The response and the support that we've received from the community has been absolutely fantastic.
Peter Ryan, NBN News.
When members of the Heaton Birmingham Gardens Bowling Club arrived this morning, they were horrified at what they saw. The pride of the club, which survived recent dry conditions and was ready to be played on today, devastated in a midnight rampage.
Somebody has had something, a grievance against the club because they came prepared and they've come with a mattock and really destroyed the green.
The green itself will cost several $1,000s to repair, but the real blow will be the lost revenue. It's not yet known how long it will be out of action or if insurance will cover the damage. However, club president Alwyn Dennis says losses could reach $15,000.
This will put us back at least another 2 to 3 months. I don't know even if the green will be ready for penance.
The club has suffered a run of bad luck. Its poker machines and cigarette dispenser have been raided 4 times in the past 7 weeks, leading to drastic measures, including this steel frame on the cigarette machine. 2 men were arrested by police on Tuesday in relation to those attacks. News Premier John Fahey had announced special award ceremonies in honour of 20,000 firefighters was welcomed by the Hunters community leaders this morning. That was until they realised the only region affected by bushfires not named as the venue for the people's vote of thanks was the Hunter Valley.
Seems a little bit odd that the Premier of New South Wales, his minders, would miss out an area as big as Tasmania with as many people in it as Tasmania.
If the Premier's not recognising them, we'll certainly be recognising the people of this area because we're very, very indebted to it.
Around 1/4 of the volunteers who worked through the bushfire disaster were engaged in the Lake Macquarie, Port Stephens, Newcastle and Upper Hunter blazes. Scenes like this have been ingrained in the memories of grateful homeowners. Fire was stopped literally at the back door of many homes.
The house definitely would have been burnt to the ground. We would have had no house at all now. There should be some recognition for them. They deserve it.
I sent a fax to the Premier this morning letting him know that we're not all that happy. We've asked to be included, of course.
Lake Macquarie is looking at having a thank you dinner at the end of the month, with others in the region likely to be held around the same time. There was praise for the public as well, emergency services saying crowds of unwanted spectators kept well away, giving firefighters easy access to trouble spots.